Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now dubbed by Disney, Orc and Lucasfilm, Legends. Star Wars, Bounty and Wars, Book 3, Hard Merchandise. Oh, you like this? Because this has almost absolutely nothing to do with the book itself. There's a red guard here. That's cool. Does that play into the book at all? No. Slight correction. This series would go before Truce of Bakura, but I wouldn't recommend it because it probably wouldn't make you want to read post Return of the Jedi. Did this book finally save this trilogy? No. It's more of the same. Again, I'll reiterate. I don't use this term very often, but it applies here. Boba Fett is a Gary Stu. He is written to be perfect. He can outsmart everyone. He's better than everyone. But in other material, he is that. But at least what he goes up against is competent. Everybody in here is retarded because they have to be. Because Boba Fett has to be the best thing ever. Dengar is characterized weirdly. He's stupid. So is Bosk, who, was always kind of stupid, but he was at least somewhat competent. They absolutely ruin within the first chapter of this book, which also was meaningless. They have Zuckuss and Forlom finally meeting back up at the end, at the first chapter of this book, and they basically don't do anything else in this entire book. They just show up to say, oh, so that character development, everything you learned about us in Tales from the Bounty Hunters, how we're going to join the Rebel Alliance, forget that. They just backtracked all of it. I never, ever, ever, ever want to hear anybody ever talk about Denningverse and how it ruined characters when it doesn't even give you an explanation. It just says, oh, well, we couldn't catch Han Solo in episode 5, so we just decided, oh, we'll give up on the Rebel Alliance and go back to being bounty hunters. It's a nothing story. And the past storyline, that we've been following with the Bounty Hunters Guild and Boba Fett and Zizor, that ends in like the first 100 pages. And then it's just the now story. And at the end of the second book, right, Zizor goes, we gotta kill Boba Fett. He's too much of a threat. In this book, he's trying to do that. He's pretty effective. Boba Fett's gonna die. And then he just flips his opinion on a dime because of some random nobody telling him, hey, maybe you should let him live because he could be useful. As if Zizor couldn't figure that out on his own. He goes, literally, it's within the span of a couple minutes that Zizor goes from using his ships to shoot Boba Fett down to, I'm going to let you go. What? And again, the pacing in these books is horrendous. I swear to God, it will just keep repeating itself and repeating itself. It'll start off with an interesting conversation, right? You got Zizor. He'll be talking about his grand plans. Like, yeah, I think I'm getting into this. And then it'll go on for another, 5 minutes. And you're like, I already got what you were saying 20 pages ago. Why are you still going? And it's like that throughout this entire trilogy. And what does it add to anything? That's what I'm trying to fathom. Making a trilogy out of this thing. Maybe if it was a single book, you could have a little niche novel, but you split it into 3 and nothing happens in any of them. Boba Fett is the most awesome bounty hunter who ever lived. Great. Can I get something to his character? I mean, even if you hate the Legacy of the Force books and what it did to his character there, which I personally liked, at least Tales from Jabba's Palace gave us the honor code that Boba Fett has. It was something. This gives us nothing. He's just awesome. All he seems to care about in these books is money. There's nothing here. Dengar doesn't act like himself throughout the entire trilogy. Neela, this girl who can't remember, it just turns out, you think it's going to be some big revelation between her and Fett, She's just somebody from Kuwait. She's like a royalty. What? you would think you would use the past storyline to influence the current. So you'd have events in the past come to do something in the present. But nothing that happens in the past matters in the present. At all. Nothing. The past storyline ends with Zizor being like, I'm not going to kill you. That's literally it. And then the story just continues on with a forward story, which is Kuat of Kuat trying to kill Boba Fett, who also, I never talked about him much, but he's pretty inconsistent. He's barely important to the first book. He's kind of interesting in the second book, and then he goes to being retarded in this book. There's just nothing to this at all. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something positive here. When Boba Fett was getting shot down by Zizor, I was entertained in that section, I guess, enough. There is a scene with Bosk and him, which I thought was pretty nuanced, a pretty great little discussion, where Bosk kind of figures out how Boba Fett thinks, and how, he kind of says, like, how Boba Fett isn't afraid to die. But I don't think the rest of the trilogy really establishes that, because he goes out of his way not to die. He's like, well, it's just inconvenient to die. It's not because it's, I'm actually scared to death. I don't know, man. I don't know if I buy that at all. But the most egregious thing about this entire trilogy is the fact that it does absolutely nothing. Fuck. Sorry. Oh my gosh, I cussed. That's the first time that's ever happened. I'll have you know, I don't. Usually. Except for when I'm really upset. And I'm genuinely upset right now. I feel like I've wasted several days of my life on this trilogy. Because even if you hate Legacy of the Force, right? At least it ends with something. At least something happens. Nothing changes in this entire trilogy. You don't even need this book to know that Boba Fett survives the Sarlacc pit, because Tales from Jabba's Palace establishes that. So does the Tales from the Bounty Hunters. You don't need this trilogy. It adds nothing. As far as I'm aware, besides Kuat of Kuat, the Kuat drive yards, other than that, nothing in this trilogy is going to be brought back up, ever. I've read everything, post-Thrawn trilogy and whatnot. There's no references to this book, because who would want to reference this garbage? I haven't even seen Book of Boba Fett, and I heard that was a travesty, and I guarantee you it's better than this book, because at least you can laugh at it, or be like, why did they have to make it so bad? Like, it's written fine. It's not a horrible book, but it's so boring, and nothing happens throughout all three of these. I can say without a doubt that this trilogy is one of the worst Star Wars stories, let alone stories in general, that I've ever read. The pacing is awful. The dialogue is redundant. Characters don't act like themselves, and when you're working in an established universe, you need to do that. There's nothing here. If you like Boba Fett, you might want to check it out anyway. But if you actually want some character growth, or like to actually understand Boba Fett as a being, this is not the trilogy for you, because you get absolutely nothing. You know what this book should have been? It should have been a video game. Because at least that would have been fun, right? Then you don't have to have characterization. I mean, most games nowadays do. Look at Naughty Dog with The Last of Us. But, if this was a game like made in the 90s, because it came out in 99, you could have had a fun little adventure with Boba Fett, bring in some characters from the EU, and then you don't have to go that deep, because it's a video game. But instead they made a novel series, 3 books, that ultimately end with nothing. What happens in this trilogy? Boba Fett survives the Sarlacc pit, which you already knew if you read other stories. He goes on a meaningless adventure that adds nothing to Boba Fett or any other of the Bounty Hunter character's growth or degrowth or anything. He just goes back to being who he always is, a bounty hunter, which is the least interesting aspect to Boba Fett, in my opinion. If you just want Boba Fett from the movies, who's amazing and mysterious and perfect at everything he does, Gary, Stu, and all, this trilogy is for you. If you actually want a story, skip. I threw that really hard. Luckily, no one's home right now. Oh my goodness. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry I was so negative. I really try to find the positive in stories. Even if I dislike them, I try to find something positive that I can take from it. You know, even if it's like, 99% of it's negative, let's find that one positive. And let me end it with how I usually am. There are sections of all three books that are intriguing, that are interesting to read. The issue being that it gets redundant, because maybe you'll have an interesting scene between Zizor and Vader and Palpatine, or Zizor and Boba, right? And if it was like maybe, a certain amount of pages, that'd be a really successful chapter. But then it goes on and on and on and on, kind of repeating the same things they're already saying, just slightly differently. And you're like, just end the damn chapter, right? It's stuff like that. So there are interesting and good written parts in every section of all three books, but it keeps going, which is the biggest issue. The pacing of this book is the worst aspect of all of it. Anyway, next time I go back to something fun, where we finally finish off the old Marvel comics. Until next time, guys, may the Force be with you.